I was thinking about forgiveness and praying about it, and I had a thing happen that ultimately it separated my family. I have a brother and mother who won't speak with me anymore, and a father who's in prison. And he wasn't a bad guy. There's no other crimes committed in his, crimes committed in his life, but this thing happened, and I'm contemplating the details or sharing them, but that's that. And I prayed for God to give me peace about it, and He did give me much peace. But then I found obviously that the hurt's still there, and some days it's worse than others, and not every day that I think about it, but I still think about it often. His family's important to me, always has been, always will be. But this is one of those cases where I understood to forgive doesn't always mean that there has to be reconciliation. In some clear ways, there may not be reconciliation because there's toxic people or just toxicity that need to be removed. But I made much progress in forgiveness and found a peace I didn't think I have, all things considered, and the pain involved. But I found that it didn't go away. And then I found that it's a little bit like a scar tissue. It's healed, it's not bleeding anymore, but it still can be tender to the touch, sensitive, require care, because that piece of skin is raised up. If you're not careful, you can tear it open again. And forgiveness is important, not so much for the person, but for you. It's often said, and I'm sure anybody watching this has heard, that holding on to unforgiveness and holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting it to kill another person. And that's true, but this was a deep cut. That wasn't good enough for me, so I prayed about it, and it became clear that it's not going to go away. But in this, I thought of a scene from this particular movie I saw, The Shack, where God is talking with this man who's had his little girl taken from him far too early. And he says, "Say I forgive." He goes, "I can't." It's just say it. He says, "I forgive him." He goes, "I don't feel anything." God instructs the man, keep on saying it. Eventually, it'll become less painful to say, and it'll become easier to say as time goes on. That's what I found. But let's look at that. Fundamentally, it's part of the Christian faith. And forgiveness is important whether you're spiritual or not. But let's just go into that. And right there in the Lord's Prayer that Jesus instructed to his followers, "Our Father, who art in heaven, holy is your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, of our sins against you, as we forgive those who trespass, who sin against us." But from that, there's a little more elaboration in Matthew 18, the parable of the king who wanted to freshen his accounts, get him up to date. So he goes to servant who owns him millions, and I'm sure that's not what it says in the Bible, but my translation does that for me so I get a better concept of New Living Translation, a better concept of what they're talking about. Oh, it's him millions of dollars. He says to the king, Master, please give me more time. I'll pay it off. And he took pity on him. He was about to sell him and his whole family into slavery. But he took pity on him and forgave him of his debt. And then that same servant goes to a fellow servant who owed him a couple of thousand. Again, not millions, but thousands. And he said, oh, just give me more time, I'll pay it off. And he didn't relent. Had him arrested. The other servants saw this, saw the hypocrisy. The king got to hearing about it. He says, you evil servant, I forgave you of that debt that you owed me, and you couldn't forgive your fellow servant. And in telling this parable, Jesus said, this is how it will be in the kingdom. Just to give you a clear cut on that, forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And then again in Proverbs 18, not Matthew 18, but Proverbs 18, it says, an offended brother is harder to win back than a fortified fortress. Meaning arguments between friends be like a locked up steel bar, door locked, protected. An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified fortress. Now, if you're the person that caused the offense, you can see very clearly you did wrong and that you try to make amends. When you're the victim, it becomes more complicated. All I can say is, in those moments of pain, it doesn't get rid of the pain, but it really does help to invite God into the situation and think about these stories and the concepts right there in the Lord's Prayer, the parable of the two servants and the king, and what Proverbs says. Proverbs acknowledges that it's hard to forgive. It's also probably a warning against offending your brother. But on the flip side of that, it acknowledges that it's hard to forgive. But in those moments of pain, whether it's easy or not, just take comfort in knowing that God can offer you comfort and rest in those moments of pain. Though you suffered loss, maybe you feel abandoned, He'll never abandon you. You'll always have the ear of the Lord. He hears your prayers. He hears the prayers of His children. And even when you feel alone, He's always there. Stop for a second. Imagine that. A God who reigns over the world and is a sovereign Lord. All those people, what He knows, each of their names. He can count the numbers on everybody's head. And just as importantly, gives an ear to each of His children that prays to Him. Usually you sacrifice quantity for quality or quality for quantity in a finite world. But God, You're sovereign and all-powerful and so big that there's that quantity and quality. A personal quality. That in itself is comforting. But that He can offer that personal ear and comfort to all of His children. equally, just as personally as he does to you, to every and each one of his children worldwide. It goes from being comforting to outright amazing. Just remember that the chip on your shoulder doesn't weigh anybody else down but you. The pain won't go away. The scar tissue will be there. But just don't fixate on it. It's raised up, the scar tissue raised up in the skin. It can be broken open, and all the work you did to find peace with it, forgiveness, can be flipped open in a moment of anger and pride. And I didn't get full details, but what happened to me was pretty bad. I'm sure others have happened worse to others, but this isn't a compare game. My point is, no matter how insignificant or how devastating the sin against you was, these concepts still apply. I'm sure there's others who have been hurt worse than myself, and those who haven't been hurt as bad as me, who feel worse about it because they haven't been able to find that peace. I urge you, don't let pride play a part in this. Don't be like that servant who was cast into jail because he was so petty over some $1,000 when he's been forgiven over millions and millions of dollars debt. All stay blessed, stay strapped with the